Bench Racing Hotline from the Gaston Gazette, the author of The Audacity of Dope and the musician of note as well. Monte Dutton joins us again. Hi, Monte. How are you tonight?
Fine. People must be listening saying, how come they're talking to a musician?
Well, you know, that's true, but you are such a good musician, you can even transcend into the NASCAR world. So that's how we do it. Now, we want to talk about your book because we didn't get a chance to talk about that the last time. But knowing Charlie's age, the last segment, he said, I got a question that I have to ask Monte. So we're going to get to that question right off the bat before he forgets it.
Okay, Charlie.
Okay, let me see if I can remember what that question was. My question was, Monte, one of Steve's Fast Lap questions this week dealt with Danica Patrick, and I would say over probably the last 30 weeks, probably 1 out of every 3 weeks, we've had some question about Danica Patrick in those Fast Lap questions, and it's supposed to be topical stuff. And I cannot for the life of me think, after 40 years of being a racing fan, of anybody who's had more talk about themselves as a race car driver and had less impact on the series than Danica's had. Am I wrong? Am I missing somebody? Steve brought – who'd you bring up?
Juan Pablo.
Steve threw out Juan Pablo, but I think Juan Pablo's had considerably more impact than
he's won a couple of road races.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wrote about this, of course, because this race at Kansas had the incident in which Danica sort of for the first time decided that she was going to be an enforcer and took exception to Landon Castle. This is a real clash of the Titans there, and decided that she wanted to spin him out, and she ended up wrecking herself. And it's I think a pretty embarrassing incident.
Yeah.
But I've actually this has been sort of a point of mine for a long time. Not only that, but I mean, okay, I really think a lot of Dale Earnhardt Jr. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think he's a great guy. But I've often wondered if anywhere in sport there was another person in any American sport or any sport anywhere that was by far the most beloved athlete but was not overwhelmingly successful. And so I feel a lot of thought of that in regard to Dale Earnhardt Jr. But I think in the case of Danica Patrick, we live in a world where hype is so important. You know, it goes back to the Andre Agassi saying that image is reality, or it's espousing that view. Well, Danica Patrick is an exceptional promoter of herself. Mm-hmm. I mean, she's gone where no athlete, man or woman, has gone before in terms of her affiliation with sponsors and things like that. She's very attractive. I think that she certainly had a respectable IndyCar career, and I think that just as a general rule, it's not necessarily a disservice. It doesn't detract from her racing Indy cars that she hasn't done well in stock cars, because it's an incredibly difficult transition to make, and she's not the first who has failed to make that transition. Now, this is a differentiation I always make, because people will say this. There's a big difference between going from sprints and midgets into other forms of racing and having a background in road racing. Statistically, if you look at the history of NASCAR, people whose background was in road racing have had a very difficult time racing stock cars on anything but road courses. And people who have driven sprints and midgets, I mean, you know, like you sit there, if you can just go back through NASCAR history and you say, who are the people who made transitions? You say Dan Gurney, but all his wins were at Riverside.
Yeah, right.
You could say A.J. Foyt and Mario Andretti. Oh, by the way, their background was sprints and midgets.
Yep.
You know, they later became outstanding at road races. So I think that the transition that Danica Patrick is making is very difficult. And I think that, but I mean, she's not making much headway. But I think that the remarkable of it is yes, that many people would love to see a great woman race car driver. And we're going to see that happen one day. And many people, you know, she gets a lot of attention for the same reason that beautiful women always get attention. But beyond that, she deserves a great deal of credit for her ability to market herself and make herself popular with sponsors, people who can fulfill her dreams. But there have to be some results, or that will not last forever. So I've probably talked through the whole show, but that's what I got to say about that.
That's okay. I'm with you on that. I mean, she deserves credit for standing up to the slings and arrows of guys like me, when we question her presence in the sport. And I'm with you. I think she deserves a lot more credit probably than she gets from the average fan. But
I mean, when you sit there, I don't know, after this record, I don't know after the weekend, I don't know. The last I noticed, she was, I think, maybe 11th in the Nationwide Series point standings, or 10th, or whatever. The fact is, though, there are only 13 drivers who have competed in every race.
Right.
So that's not it. You can't really make her Nationwide Series career impressive because she has had equipment better than many other people, and you can't just say that JR Motorsports went down the tubes when she got there.
The other thing, Monty, in regards to her and her success, I guess, is dependent upon her having sponsorship in this series. And it came into question a little bit, I guess, this week, and I guess GoDaddy has decided they will stick with her as her main sponsor. But there was some question whether GoDaddy would stick with her with the new ownership of GoDaddy and all this. And it brings up the second, that was an intro to this question, which was Dale Earnhardt Jr. has lost a fair amount of sponsorship today, with Pepsi saying that they are going to cut back from 20 races to, I think it was somewhere around 5 with him. Where is this going to end in this sport? And these guys are losing sponsorship, and I see no end in sight to this. We thought we were going to see it 2 years ago and then a year ago, and somewhere along the line it was going to turn around, but I don't see it turning around. If anything, I see it getting worse.
Well, the reason is because it's twofold. It's just like in my business, those of us who are journalists, we were already struggling, and the economy really aggravated it. Right. Newspapers, the whole media in America, everywhere from books to records, and things like that. So I think it's also there's a double factor in NASCAR, because not only has the economy greatly hindered the most quintessentially commercial American sport, but it's also come at a time when the sport itself is slumped. You can't just say it's because of the economy. If you say that people still love racing, but they just don't go to as many races because they can't afford it, then you can't really justify the fact that television ratings have also declined. NASCAR has become a sport. If this were 1993, when I first started covering NASCAR, it would have been almost unthinkable to imagine going to a race where the race and the race broadcast not being on radio. Back before people had scanners, fans sat in the stands and listened to the radio of the race. And there's a lot of places now where the race isn't even on locally. Now, part of that is because NASCAR coverage has been so prominent on satellite radio, because satellite radio is probably great for the sport, but it probably diminishes the market in a local AM station. Yep. So what I'm saying is, if it was true that it was all the economy, then there would be twice as many people watching on television, right. And there aren't. So the sport is having, I think part of it is also just, part of that's unavoidable. You can't. There's some people who came to NASCAR and it was somewhat of a fad, and fads don't last. You can't be the hula hoop forever. I have some optimism from a personal standpoint, because every time in my lifetime that my beloved country music has become popular with everybody, it's ruined it for me, and I thought it really was terrible. And then when it collapses and the kids start listening to something else, it goes back to its basics. And I think that's what's happening with NASCAR right now. I mean, what the new changes NASCAR made were getting rid of the top 35, and all these things, and cars that look more like it. I wrote a column last week that I was kind of surprised that they didn't have that they didn't put in a provisional for ex-moonshiners.
Well, maybe they should have. Monty, we haven't talked about your book yet. Can you hang on through the break, and we'll go to break, and we'll come back? All right, good deal. We're going to take this this break, and when we come back, more with Monte Dutton. This is On Pit Row.
Fastest show on Ustream TV.
This is On Pit Row.